it's lights out and away we go. Hello, racers. Welcome to the first episode of the Hard or Soft podcast. My name's Adrian Huff. I'm your host, and I'm joined as always by my co-host and producer, RJ McCullough. How's it going?
Good, man. Good to see you finally. Good to finally get this going.
Yes, absolutely.
A little peek behind the curtain for the fans. We met, I guess, pretty randomly on Reddit, like 6 weeks ago or so, and just been chatting since then. So
yeah, I made a post because I've been wanting to start like a Formula One podcast just because I have really nobody to talk to about this sport. And I just kind of made a post saying if anybody out there had any like suggestions or fresh ideas, and you made a comment, and then you just kind of DM'd me and we just kind of talked a little bit more, got to know each other. And then of course I found out that you actually sort of work in the industry and that, you know, you wanted to potentially help out with the show. And then it just kind of turned into both of our show, which I think is awesome. But yeah, tell me, well, obviously I know a little bit about you, but like, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. It's been definitely interesting and cool getting to know you. We've been like talking nonstop for a week, so it's good to finally get this started. But yeah, so a little bit of background about me. I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So it's still cold and snowy here right now, but that's all right. I just turned 30, well, almost turning 31 actually. That's coming up. But
nice.
I worked in the industry since I started at like a golf magazine when I was 16, 17, and then went to school for broadcast journalism. Took an internship there's two main sports networks in Canada, TSN and Sportsnet. So I did an internship with TSN and then an internship with Sportsnet. And then I got hired there about 10, 11 years ago now. And I've just been doing, my job title is media coordinator. It's a long thing to explain, but yeah, so my whole life has been either working in or playing or revolved around sports. But F1's sort of been in terms of all the sports that I followed in my life, F1's definitely the newest one I've gotten into, but it's definitely right up there with hockey. And as Canadian, it's obviously we all love hockey, but F1 I've never like fallen for a sport like this so fast since I was a little kid. So it's amazing. And it's great to meet someone that's in the same mindset. I think we both got into it relatively the same way at the same time. So yeah, if you want to like tell, I don't even know if we've discussed in depth this. So yeah, if you want to mention like how you got into F1 and sort of just your background too.
Sure. Yeah. You're definitely way more involved in the sports world. But yeah, that's amazing. I started getting into Formula One. This past season, the 2021 season, is actually the first season that I watched from start to finish. The previous season, I actually discovered, you know, like the Formula One YouTube channel. I would watch like highlights of the race occasionally, just because I started getting into racing a little bit, race cars. That just really piqued my interest. And then, of course, I found Drive to Survive, binged that. I think I've probably watched that show like 3 or 4 times, but it has become like the only thing that I've like been following. Like I like football. I watch baseball. Of course, I'm from Atlanta, so I've gone to see the Braves a couple of times, the Falcons, UGA. My sister is actually a student at UGA, so them just winning the national championship this past season has been pretty cool. But I am not in the sports industry. I'm a full-time photographer. I do like stand-up comedy on the side, but I think that kind of makes the dynamic of the show a little bit more interesting because you sort of have an insight to the sports world. You can provide a little bit more insight, but I'm sort of like the outside perspective, maybe. I don't know. That just is kind of like the way my dumb brain thinks. But yeah, I've just become such a huge, massive fan of the sport. But yeah, it is just completely taken over my life. Like, it's pretty much been the only thing that I've paid attention to. I'm trying to think of different things to describe myself, but I'm just like so not involved in the sports world. But I love sports. You know, I've been watching like football and all that stuff since I was a kid. But yeah.
It's been a good year for Georgia sports, which is pretty rare to say. I think we talked about early on, like starting the podcast and what we kind of wanted. We kind of had similar ideas about how, you know, we both started with Drive to Survive, and I think most, if not, well, I'm not gonna say all, most newish fans in North America, that's how we've gotten into it. And it's become huge. Like you saw the numbers at was it Coda for the US Grand Prix last year? Like the numbers are rising huge for North American fans. And we sort of want to be like a voice for, obviously for fans, long-term fans, but also the new fans that are sort of like us, that are still learning. Like we're not going to pretend that we know everything about F1. We're going to make mistakes. And if we do, feel free, listeners, to tell us. Don't be too mean about it, but yeah, feel free to tell us. But yeah, like I think we're both kind of in the same boat in terms of we want to have a voice for like-minded fans. And just kind of, there's, especially over this last off season, there's just been so much like crap with like what happened, and just there's not too many podcasts in this space necessarily, especially in North America. And I don't know, I think it's a good opportunity for us, hopefully, and we'll just see what happens, right?
Yeah, for real. And like you said, it is definitely soaring, the popularity over here. But at the same time, I only know one person, and like out of my coworkers, my friends, my family, one coworker that watches Formula One. And, you know, that is just like insane, because I feel like this is like the most, like it's the coolest, most fascinating, intense, and fun sport to watch. So yeah, I definitely think it's a great opportunity. And I do think it can be a little bit intimidating to get into the sport, because it's nothing like any other sport. I mean, I guess like something like NASCAR, you know, obviously is similar, but at the same time, like they have very few similarities. Yeah, exactly. Besides just a guy behind the wheel of a car.
Right.
But yeah, definitely the sort of like the thesis or whatever of the podcast is just sort of, we want to try to help sort of expand the Western audience to Formula One, and sort of give the new fans kind of a chance to give them a place to go to sort of like have a discussion, and just basically have two people like us to sort of like be the voice, or basically just to answer some questions or whatever that may be. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it can be like you said, a bit intimidating, kind of a tough sport to kind of jump into, because there is like it's a very steep learning curve to really understand everything. Like even when I like tell people that I've fallen in love with F1, most of their first thing they say is like, oh, you just like watch a car drive around a track for 3 hours, and like, well, no, first of all, that's NASCAR, but second of all, like it's completely different. There's so much behind it, all the drama and like the inner team workings and the cars themselves, and like there's just so much fascinating stuff to it, and it can be like a little bit almost intimidating to get into. So I think if we can help, like you said, maybe, I don't know if help, you know, it's hard to say we're going to help, but if we can just sort of be like a place for like-minded people to congregate, and we can chat with, and just to see where it goes and have fun with it. And it should be hopefully an amazing season. I mean,
yes,
I guess we should probably discuss our the way last season ended, and before we do, we should probably get our biases out of the way. I'm clearly a Lewis fan.
But yeah, like you said, I mean, you're more knowledgeable than me, obviously, but neither of us are experts by any means. You know, we're both just a couple of guys that we're just fans, basically. And I definitely think that that's a good thing. That gives us a chance to sort of lessen the tension, I guess, or make it a little less intimidating. You know, if someone's listening to a dumbass like me talk about Formula One, then that make it a little bit easier to sort of get into the sport. But yeah, this past season was just insane. There's, you know, we both have, you know, our favorite drivers or whatever. Clearly you're a Mercedes fan, Lewis fan, and I'm a little bit of a Max fan. Sort of this past season, I sort of gravitated towards Red Bull and Max. I just decided sort of like right at the start of the season, I was like, all right, I'm going to follow Red Bull. I'm going to cheer for them. But that doesn't mean I don't love Lewis. I don't think he is the greatest of all time. I definitely think he's better than Schumacher, Senna. You know, he's just the greatest of all time. I think at this point, it's sort of undisputed, because he sort of has, I mean, he does have 7 world championships, but I mean, this last one's a little, you know, it's a little shady, but he's incredible. And I love Bottas. Obviously he's not racing with them anymore, but I absolutely love the dynamic with Mercedes. I think Toto is like a great team principal. I hit, especially the dynamic between him and Christian, like how they just kind of like jab at each other and sort of bust each other's balls just to sort of add a little bit of like intimidation. I love that. But yeah, how long have you always just kind of been like a Lewis fan?
Yeah, I guess like before I even got into F1, Lewis was sort of the first driver that I was aware of. It's because he's obviously so good. And then
Yeah.
generally, like I'll admit, I hate when people jump into sports and become like a front runner. But
Yep.
so I didn't want necessarily to be a Lewis fan, but or like the top teams fan. But I just pretty much just fell in love with how he like composed himself in the media and like his style of driving. It's very different than like a Schumacher or even a Senna or a Max. They're a little more, in my opinion, a little more aggressive, which is fine. Like that's a style of driving. And Lewis can be as well, but a little more like tactical, I think is maybe the word that we've used. So yeah, I just like love everything about on and off the track about Lewis, and I certainly respect Max. I mean, my background is Dutch, so like I have every reason in the world to love Max.
Yeah.
But I don't know, there's been a few times where he's rubbed me the wrong way, and that could change over the years. I don't dislike him by any means. I respect him so much. He's an amazing driver. But yeah, it's definitely like Lewis, my favorite. I'd say, I mean, we'll get into our favorite drivers at some point, but yeah, like I'd say Lewis, Lando is probably Lando and Danny, maybe 2 and 3 for me. But yeah, like I guess do you have like a favorite and a least favorite, or do you just kind
Oh yeah.
of?
I can't say that I actually dislike any of the drivers. Because I do think they're all, I mean, you have to be extremely talented to make it to Formula One, whether you pretty much have like a paid seat, you can't get put in that car if you don't have like a top mindset and a top skill level. Lewis is definitely one of my favorites. I think he is just incredible. Like you said, his driving style is just so precise. He's so just skillful. Like I feel like his skill level is just unbelievable. And like Brazil in this past year, like just watching him completely and utterly dominate the field, like go from the back to the front of the grid. It was hard to not, or it was hard to root for Max. I'm not even going to lie for during that weekend, because it was like one of the most incredible achievements I've ever seen. He is incredible. So it's going to be hard for me to not cheer for him this year, because I do, even though I am a Max fan, the finale Grand Prix this past season definitely was not good. There's been so much toxicity and just terrible, like cancerous opinions and takes that people have had. Everybody's entitled their opinion, but saying that, just some really evil things people have been saying, racist, horrible things. It was, I think, is a big fuck up. And I mean, yeah, it's just, it's even hard to even grasp, because it's such it's like just there was so much buildup, and I'm not even gonna lie, it was disappointing. Like in the moment, I was like screaming at my TV, and
Right.
but I didn't have really the hindsight. When it ended, I was just like, something about this doesn't feel right. And I know, Red Bull was like obviously extremely excited, but when you put entertainment above safety and rules, that's not right.
Yeah, I mean, everyone involved, I think, is pretty open with the fact that it was handled wrong. Like I don't even know what to say. There's so much to go into with it that we probably wouldn't be able to do it justice to like recap the entire race and everything that happened.
Yeah. I definitely think we can. I feel like in one of our episodes before the season begins, I think we can devote an entire episode to just mostly recapping the finale. I definitely think that could, because yeah, like you said, I don't know if we could do it justice by just sort of like quickly recapping, because it's too much to, it's too much to discuss in this first episode, because we do have a lot of notes and a lot of things to go through for this episode. But just the starting, like the fact that he caught up, it was a 1 point deficit. It's it had the potential to be like one of the most epic moments in sporting history, and it just sort of, the ending was just sort of tanked. Of course, most people that are listening to this are familiar with what happened. But yeah, I do think if you're not, then damn, you have a lot of information to read through, because I mean, I do think that the repercussions that the FIA has had have been warranted. Firing Massi, if that's how you, I think that's how you pronounce his name, but yeah, firing him, I think that was the best move, because it seemed like he had messed up a lot during the season, but that the last race was just irredeemable. And it was, I think that the I don't know if it's like a rule or whatever it is, but the team principals having direct communication with the race director should not be allowed. I definitely think, like you said, like we had talked about a couple of days ago, Red Bull and Mercedes were both in his ear. But of course, what was his name? It wasn't Christian Horner. It was the other Red Bull guy on the pit wall.
Yeah. It wouldn't have been Helmut Marko, I don't think. I'm drawing a blank right now, but regardless.
Yeah, he pretty much said, let's let the cars between Max and Lewis unlap themselves, but let the ones behind them not, so we can get the final lap. And it was, a split-second decision that had massive repercussions. Just all around a really terrible incident, honestly.
Yeah, and like I guess there's no way to know what other pressures were on him. Like if there's the FIA itself was saying, we don't want this to end under a safety, or we want we want an exciting finish, or whatever the case may be. People can have their conspiracy theories, but even as a Lewis fan, I don't think there's anything racist or anything involved in the actual decision. I think just to say that, or to say that the FIA didn't want him to get his 8th title, like I think that's a bit much. Like I just think things happened, and I mean, it's funny as a person that sort of at the end of the year, I'm not gonna lie, I was rooting a little bit against Red Bull, not even because of Max, just Christian Horner. He's so good at his job that I sometimes dislike him, like I can't deny that he's amazing at his job, but he just pisses me off sometimes. But I guess that it's like when you hate someone in a movie, it's like, well, they're a good actor because you hate them.
Yeah, he can definitely be extremely unlikable at times.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess just to put a button on that, so Massi was replaced as race director. Niels Wittich and Eduardo Freitas. There's no chance I got the pronunciation of those done properly, but that's okay. Niels worked in the World Endurance Championship, and Eduardo was in DTM. Not going to pretend I know what DTM stands for, but yeah. So they have some experience as race directors, but again, I'm gonna have to do a bit more of a deep dive into what their history is. I'm kind of hoping that as the season gets picked up a little more, the F1 will kind of tell us as fans, like they've yet to really come out and say like we admit we made a mistake, but it's pretty clear by the actions they've made replacing Massi that they essentially are admitting that they made a mistake. So
yeah, we'll
see. Yeah.
And I do like the idea of having 2 guys at the helm. And it's also, from how they described it, it seems more like that those 2 were making like the final decision, but there's like a team of people who are like having discussions, looking at information, and sort of giving them input, basically. So it's not just one guy making the final call. And I do think that's smart. I obviously, Red Bull have been very vocal that they're against the firing of Michael, but I mean, of course they have to. He's the reason they have the drivers' championship in 2021. Helmut Marko, he makes it hard for me to be a Red Bull fan, because I genuinely dislike that man. I feel like he just is. He's so toxic, and that's part of the game, is kind of shitting on your competitors or whatever, but he just takes it too far, man. Like, even to the point where
this week he's still like twisting the knife on Lewis. Like,
yes, he is. Yes, exactly. And he was talking crap about McLaren, like, because they're original design that they posted didn't have like a sponsor or anything on the side, and he was basically saying like they're begging for a sponsor or something. It's like, come on, dude.
Like the McLaren. I'm sure they're okay. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But yeah, that makes it really, really difficult. But I think it's going to be interesting this next season that they've disabled the FIA radio, so we won't get to hear the communication, sadly. But it also, if I'm correct on this, to my knowledge, the team principals won't have like direct contact with the directors. If anything, they'll have contact with like one of like the liaisons or whoever are in the room with them, which I still don't like the idea that the team principals have influence over rulemaking decisions like at all. But I do think that they've taken steps in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, as far as I understand, there's like almost like a middleman where someone that they can squawk to, and then if it's worthy of reporting to the race director, then it'll get to them. But it's not like that constant direct conversation and all of that stuff. And like Toto trying to get in his ear, and it was all year. Like it was literally all year between Toto and Christian. And but yeah, they have a new thing. I think they're trying to say it's a bit like VAR, where they'll have like a team, or almost in like hockey, it's called like a war room, where if there's like a close call, they won't just leave it up to the race director. They'll have sort of a team of guys in a room that are looking at every angle and every whatever you want, every possibility and all that. So that's at least from a fan's perspective. At the end of last year, I think a lot of fans, whether Hamilton fans or just fans of the sport, even as you said, even as a Max fan, a lot of people kind of were left looking like, okay, going into that race that could have ended as the best F1 season of all time, and after the race, looking at it like, why am I putting so much time and energy into this sport when this is what's going to happen? Like if it's going to be just at the first like week or two after, it was like, do I even want to watch F1 after this?
Right.
But obviously that's changed now. I couldn't be more excited for the season, but it is nice to see that they've at least acknowledged, without acknowledging that they made a mistake, they've acknowledged that they made a mistake,
Yeah, sort of indirectly. It's going to be fascinating. I'll say I still love Red Bull. Mostly I like Sergio a lot. I think he's a good driver. But I'm definitely a Max fan. Like you said, he can definitely rub you the wrong way a lot. He's rubbed me the wrong way a couple of times during the season as well. But I just like him as a driver. But this season, I think I'm going to be a Ferrari fan. I'm not even going to lie. And I love Charles and Carlos. I think they're just like such a cool duo. I just like think it's perfect. And I feel like Ferrari's due for a little bit of a redemption, especially after the last couple of years. But it's going to be interesting how it all plays out, because there's a lot of changes, not only to the cars and the rules, but just to everything. I mean, we're getting new tracks, and now we're getting less tracks apparently, because I guess they won't be going to Russia this year. And there's
we'll
talks.
Get into that later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I guess that's a perfect segue then. Do you want to get into our livery rankings for the year?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. If you want to kick off your list first, then I can run through mine, and then we can definitely talk about sort of our favorite teams and our least favorite teams and drivers.
All right, so liveries. Let me just get my list out here. I'm gonna go reverse order, okay?
Yep.
You want me to go 10 to 1 and then you'll go?
Yeah.
All right. Number 10. This kind of goes without saying with what everything's happened. And this is just livery, but Haas has to be 10. I mean,
yeah.
That's almost just a given right now. Okay, so I'm just going to go through till I get to the top 3. I'm just going to rip through them. Number 9, Alfa Romeo. Number 8, and I'll put pictures and stuff up, Alpine. 7, Red Bull. 6, Williams. 5, McLaren. 4, AlphaTauri. 3, Mercedes. 2, Aston Martin. And number 1, Ferrari. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful car.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. Mine's a little bit different. I was definitely excited during the reveal, but I definitely think my least favorite is the Alpine. I love the all pink look. It goes back to the Racing Point days. But just the blue and pink, I think at first glance it's cool, but seeing it on track, it's almost like it should have been like maybe like a gradient where it's like instead of just like two blocky colors, but I don't know. I just it almost looks a little bit ugly to me in the sunlight at least. But yeah. I hope people
I agree.
don't hate me for saying that. But
Yeah.
next is going to be excuse me, is going to be Williams. I like the blue a lot. I think it's really cool, but it's just a little bit too basic for me. So that's going to be number 9. Number 8 is Alfa Romeo. I think it's got a really, really cool vintage look to it. I love the like Italian, the red, white, and green look on the tail. I think that's really cool. But yeah, it's nothing really special. It looks really similar to their last year's car. Next would be Haas. I actually like the way their livery looks now that they've taken off their sponsor.
Yes,
And again,
yes, I agree. It would move up my list in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get into that, but I think the all white with when they took off the sponsor, it just gave it more of like it looked less clutter to me, and I like that a lot. After that would be McLaren. I think that is just such a sleek looking car. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. After that would be AlphaTauri. I think they've improved their design from last year a lot. It just looks really, really sleek to me. Then after that's going to be Red Bull, just because I'm just a big Red Bull fan. I love the colors they do, and just comparing the last year's car to this year's car, it's just so gorgeous to me. Then next would be Aston Martin. It's close. I think that green, especially in the sun, it's just, oh my God, it's so nice. It's amazing. Then after that would be Mercedes. I think, yeah, that's number 2, right?
I think so.
I've lost track. But yeah, the Mercedes, I love them going back to the silver. It's great. The little bit of green on there. It's just a beautiful car. Like it really is. It's definitely one of my favorites. But then of course, number 1, like you, is Ferrari. It's just like the tail fins, the shape, the way it bends, the red. It is so intimidating, and it looks amazing. And of course, it seems like it's the fastest car. And that's not what I'm basing my ranking off of. But God, it is just. I would love to see that car in person. It would be so cool. It is so gorgeous.
Yeah, they absolutely nailed it with everything. It's arguably the nicest Ferrari that I saw pictures online of all the Ferraris through the years. It's arguably the nicest one.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's simple, but it's so nice. But yeah, I think with the Alpine, you pointed out, I think it was you pointed out that when they're in their I don't want to say outfits, like their racing gear, it looks like they're like Baskin Robbins employees. Yeah. Like I couldn't unsee that. And yeah, when they did I think I felt guilty to when teams do their launches, I just want to like the car so bad that when I see the first look, I'm always like, oh, it looks nice. It looks nice. And then you see it on the track sometimes. And that's definitely one where it went from maybe like middle of the pack to me to, I think I had it like 8 or 9. Like it's definitely disappointing. And then, yeah, it's interesting. They're doing the pink car for the first 2, and then they're just going back to that one. So who knows?
Yeah, I didn't read if there was like a reason behind that, but I think it's cool that they're doing the all pink, but just the first 2 races is so strange to me because I know McLaren likes to do their like the Monaco or the Gulf livery or whatever. It just seems like something that they would maybe do like at certain races, like maybe at the French Grand Prix or something like that. It's sort of an odd choice to me. I was sort of hoping that they would stick with the all pink, but you know, they've changed. Obviously, they've now gone through 3 different names at this point, but I like the spirit of it, but just the execution, I'm not really a big fan of.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And the other one thing I was reading somewhere that after the first 2 races, I think it's just a coincidence that they chose 2 races for the livery, but after the first 2 races, teams kind of have the opportunity to decide what they are going to approve or disapprove of what other teams have done. Because obviously with the new regulations, there's going to be huge differences. Like we saw with Ferrari, they have those like side pod things that it looks like if it rains, they would just get filled up with water. But I saw Ted Kravitz, I think he was like Ted's notebook, and he was basically explaining it's like he used like a baby bell shell, and like the air just goes in and comes out, and I don't know how the science of it doesn't make sense to me, but I mean, it's one of those things that could be a huge advantage. And then even if other teams can catch up after 2 races, if you can bank like 2 wins, there's 50 points, so
Yep.
it'll be very interesting to see the differences in the teams.
I was just going to say, I hope, because I know there's sort of like a grace period between these two testing events that teams can sort of protest if they notice something about another team's car. And I'm just, Ferrari's looking so good. I'm just so worried that Toto or Christian's going to be like, nope, get rid of it. Get rid of it. That's not right. Sort of like how they did. Well, I guess that was the 2019 season when Ferrari was just extremely fast. They weren't able to beat Lewis, obviously, but then they hit them with the regulation change at the end of the season. And then the next season, they were just like slow. I'm really afraid that something like that's going to happen. But yeah, the way it bends, like you said, it does look like it. If it was in the wet, it would just get flooded. But it's going to be cool, man. It's going to be really, really cool to see them racing and on track.
Yeah, I think, and everyone from top to bottom, I think everyone wants to see like closer racing, closer battles, and a more like as great as it was last year, just having Lewis and Max pretty much off in the distance on their own, like 2 legends basically in the making, going battling. I think everyone would love to see, back to, I forget if it was 2009, 2010, and there was like 6 different teams that had a chance every week or something, even if it's just Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari, those 8 guys, and then a few, like if Vettel can get in there or whatever, if you go into a race and you have the possibility of 10 guys could win that race, I mean, that would be unbelievable and be so cool with the new regulations. It seems like the cars are able to, from first testing, it seems like they are able to trail a little bit better. So that'll be really cool if they are actually tighter in terms of actual speed and then tighter in terms of actual ability without the dirty air. So we'll see.
Yeah, because that's the whole reason that they've raised the front wing, right? So it, like, the dirty air affects them less. I mean, that's what the FIA is claiming, that these new cars are like, that's what the change is for, is that they're going to be able to overtake more and the fighting's going to be a lot closer, which if I could have one wish for this upcoming season, it would be exactly what you said. I don't just want to see Max and Lewis in the distance, Mercedes and Red Bull just going at it. I think not only me, I know that a lot of people are sick of it, obviously they're going to be up front. They're going to be doing great, but I just want to see more teams and more drivers competing for Ferrari and McLaren, obviously, but I would love to see Vettel up at the front. And I want to see some of the back markers get more points. Cause I mean, Haas, they didn't get any points that past season. I don't think. Williams, I think it's a miracle that they were even able to get any points, which, to their credit, they got points in numerous Grand Prix, which I think that's pretty remarkable. But Alfa Romeo ended up with just a handful of points. That's just disappointing, especially for Kimi's last season. But it would just be great to have more teams up at the front.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Do we want to discuss porpoising, or is that something that you think will be decided fixed by the start of the season? It's like the new buzzword in F1. I only know the very basis, which my explanation, and then I'll let you explain because I'm sure you know better than me. All I know basically is at the end of straights, there's a bit of a bouncing effect when they try and go into like their breaking point, or when the downforce is supposed to kick in, the car sort of bounces, which can be very dangerous, but also that's not what you want. And they didn't expect it to happen, but I don't understand really the reasoning behind it or what. So what do you know?
Yeah. I pretty much know, as far as like what causes it, pretty much the same extent as you, but I do know that Zach Brown said he said that he said something, because McLaren is like one of the few teams that hasn't been an issue. And in an interview, they asked him, like, what did they do? And he was pretty much like, we don't have an answer. We have no idea why our car isn't doing that, which I think is total BS. Obviously, they know they have some sort of fix, but according to the team principal of Ferrari, Binotto, is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah, Binotto. I'm not sure because they always say it in the Italian.
Yeah. No, according to him, they've fixed that problem. I don't know if that's just him playing mind games with Red Bull and Mercedes and McLaren, but he says that it's not an issue for them anymore. But they were still having issues with it in the last day of testing. So it's it could be a problem for all the teams. Honestly, it's definitely dangerous. It can cause, mechanical issues, if, and it'll be interesting if like some of the lower teams that are having a little more trouble with the development of their car, if they keep having that issue throughout the season, could be a big problem for sure.
Yeah, certainly. So we're recording this on Sunday night. We're not exactly sure when it's going to officially be out, but as of this moment, it's basically 2 weeks until cars they're going to be pulling into the first race in Bahrain. So there's on one hand a lot of time, but on another hand not a lot of time, and it's going to be just fascinating to see. Like this week, it's almost like there's so much stuff happens every day. It's hard to keep up. And this week, I mean, I think we're almost ready to get into the Haas situation, because that's going to be something that is going to really bubble up even more this week. And I don't know if you want to discuss the Russia situation and what's been going on.
Sure. Yeah. Geez, it's a lot. It's definitely something that's going to have lasting effects throughout the entire season. But obviously, the situation in Ukraine, it's developing. It's only like the 4th or 5th day. We're not gonna really get into the whole details of like the actual conflict. It's obvious. Everybody has the exact same stance. It's horrible. It's horrific. It's scary. Evil. But Haas obviously is an American team, but they have deep roots in Russia. Their biggest sponsor is a Russian sponsor, and Nikita Mazepin is a Russian driver. He's connected to that sponsor. He's their second driver. And now that this is happening, that Russia is invading Ukraine and sort of doing these horrible, horrible things. Obviously, it's the Russian government. There's protests happening all over Russia with the citizens saying, it's not right, that they don't want this. But, I don't know if it was Haas's decision on their own or if like their other sponsors were sort of pressuring them, but they decided to pull that Russian sponsor, which was why they kind of went up in my livery list.
Yes.
But yeah, there's that, and this is them removing the sponsor is going to have a huge implication for their season, because not only are they losing a lot of money, but they could be losing a driver. They haven't commented on exactly the decision they're going to make. I think we'll see what that is this week. Hopefully in the next episode, we'll be able to have an answer for that. But yeah, it's crazy. It's just, and the fact that this is happening so early into the season, so deep and like into the testing, like the ball's already rolling, and now this crap is happening. It's mind-boggling. It really is. And of course they canceled the Russian GP, so I don't know. I think they claim Gunther Steiner, the race director for Haas, said that they're going to be fine without that sponsor, that there's other, like they have a war chest or whatever it's called. He said that they're going to be fine for the season, but I don't know, man. I don't know if you have any other views on that or your hindsight, but it's crazy.
Anyone that's watched Drive to Survive, I can just picture Gene Haas having that conversation with Gunther and being like, I can't keep putting more money into this thing. Like, we're not making any money here. And I feel bad for them, because like there is no way for them. I mean, you could make the case you get in bed with the Russian government, but I'm not going to go into politics, stuff like that. But yeah, there's no way for them to know. And for this to happen now, right before the season, and everyone knows Mazepin, he's a pay driver. He's widely regarded as, let's say, the least good driver on the grid. But yeah, it's unfortunate. His comments this week didn't do him any favors. It's a tough situation to be in, but and like he probably has to go back and live in Russia. So I mean, it's tough to come out against it. We're seeing it across other sports, like Alexander Ovechkin in hockey. He's getting kind of bashed for his statements, and there's been other guys that have come out against it, and they've had bad things happen to them. So it's an impossible situation, but it's going to be really interesting to see how they deal with the fallout without having their main sponsor. And then the other kind of wrinkle to that is we've seen Andretti Racing has been very vocal about trying to get into the sport. Apparently they've been trying to buy Haas for the last 2 years, and they've been unsuccessful. And now the F1's saying maybe in 2024 they're gonna have to pay a $200 million fee, which they're saying no problem. They can find that in their couch cushions essentially. And so that's something that, I mean, I think it's probably too late for that to happen, but I mean, there is a world and a possibility that Andretti becomes the main sponsor. I have no idea. And I think right now the discussions of who would replace Mazepin if that were to happen, because his dad is, I don't exactly know his ties, but he's like the main stakeholder in the company that was sponsoring them or something of that nature. So really without those ties, there's no real reason to keep Nikita as their driver unless it's just too far down the road. But I guess what they've discussed is Giovinazzi or Nico Hülkenberg are the two leading candidates, but who knows? If Andretti were to get that sponsorship, he's been very vocal about in IndyCar, he has a team Andretti, and their number one driver is, I believe he's 21 years old, Colton Herta, and he's like a really talented up and coming driver. He's the youngest driver to win an IndyCar race. He won 3 races last year. His dad was like a very successful race car driver himself, as many drivers are. So that'd be very interesting, especially like as we said at the top of the podcast, like the growing market in North America for the sport. It's not an untapped market, but it's a huge market that they obviously want to capitalize on. They're already adding another race. The numbers through the roof. Netflix is thriving, blah blah blah. But if that were to happen, that'd be huge for the audience of the US to get an American driver, and a young American driver that I don't think he has his super license yet. But I think if you were to finish top four this year in Indy, and also F1 has the ability to just say like, no, we think you're good enough, we'll give you the super license, which kind of defeats the purpose of it all. But so that would be, I know it's a bit of a tangent. I'll stop with my low rant, but it was it's an interesting little wrinkle that whether it happens in 2 years or it happens this year or next year. And I think Andretti Racing, it seems at this point it's almost inevitable that they're going to get into the sport. So whether it's an 11th team or they replace another team, it remains to be seen, but it'll be very interesting. And just on that, Indy had their first race this season today, and Colton Herta finished 4th, and Roman Grosjean, the former former F1, obviously one of the most famous crashes of the last few years, unfortunately, he finished 5th. So he's doing pretty well there. So
interesting. That's something I need to get more into is IndyCar. I actually had no idea that their season was about to start until you said something, which that's great because I need more racing content. That's not NASCAR. I was missing it. That's crazy. Yeah. 4th place. That's great news for him. I think what you said is exactly on the money. It's a really tough situation for Gene Haas and Gunther. Because, without obviously I'm sure they care about Nikita and I'm sure they are very fond of him as a person, but with just his track record as a driver, he's obviously the worst driver on the grid to me, I think he's the worst, and statistically he's also the worst, but there's just really no reason to keep him. And especially being an American team, I think the potential to have an American driver, if they were to go that route with Andretti, could be a really great potential boost for them, honestly, and for the sport itself. I don't know if that's something that Haas is even considering, and if it's not, then I really do genuinely hope that the FIA allows Andretti to join in 2024, because I think there needs to be some fresh faces in the sport, more competition, which could be scary to some of the other teams. But yeah, I hope that's the route that it goes, because the whole situation is just not great.
Yeah, we saw like a few years ago when it was, and everyone was saying it was like the pink Mercedes, and there was the threat from a new team, and the teams at the top don't necessarily like that, but it's good for the sport. And especially if it's with a young American driver, it's not to say he's going to be like a legend of the sport or anything, but it would just be really good for the sport and for Americans and young up and coming American drivers to see that in the sport. And that's a possibility, because here in Canada, we'd have 2 of maybe not the best drivers on the grid, but like to get into F1, especially like Latifi, he is a bit of a pay driver, but he doesn't have a dad that owns a team. Whereas Stroll, I'll be the first to admit, he's certainly not my favorite driver. He's near the bottom, but
it's a developing situation. Like you said, it's definitely going to be something that we're going to keep discussing throughout the episodes, because there's definitely going to be more developments happening over the next couple of weeks. And there's really no way to see or to even predict what's going to happen, because already this has just been so crazy and unpredictable. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Okay, so do you want to do some preseason predictions, or do you think we should wait until maybe another week or so until we get a little bit more information on what's going on?
Yeah, if you we can maybe just discuss like sort of like what's been going on in the preseason and some of the results
Okay.
some of the teams have been getting.
Yeah.
Because that's pretty much what we can base what's going to happen in the season off of. I think I'll start off with some of the teams that I think look the weakest. Obviously, I think Alfa Romeo. If I had to pick one team, I think that looks the weakest, it's Alfa Romeo. They looked pretty good in the speed traps. I think Bottas was in like the top 7. But at the same time, I think in day 3, Nikita had the fastest speed trap. Which, that obviously doesn't mean anything. Teams run different setups, but it seems that they're having a really hard time with reliability. They did not get a lot of laps in, same with Haas, but obviously I don't know if that was a reliability issue. I think that was more of a PR issue and sort of like a scrambling problem. But yeah, Alfa Romeo just doesn't look very strong to me. And again, they could come out of the gate. So Bottas could come and, get a podium, for all we know. It's totally up in the air. But I think also Alpine is looking a little bit rough too. They didn't seem to get a ton of laps in, and Fernando Alonso, obviously his car broke down, and I don't know if it caught fire, but it was like smoking like crazy. I don't know if you saw that picture of him standing there.
It's a cool picture, actually.
It is, yeah, for sure. But the same thing happened to Aston Martin. Seb, of course, that man does everything. He had a fire extinguisher extinguishing his own car. But they seem to look a little bit better, because I think in day 1 he was like 3rd fastest, if I'm correct.
I've seen so many like lists of drivers and times that I only remember, to be honest, like who led after each day, which, as you said, you have to take with such a grain of salt, because we don't know their setups. We don't know how much fuel they have in the car. We don't know if they're sandbagging, but it does seem there's a bit of a pattern in terms of the teams that are performing at the top.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess you mentioned earlier, Ferrari does seems to be, and other teams have even mentioned, Ferrari does seem to be a little bit ahead in terms of the top team on the grid right now. But I remember at this point last year, people were kind of frowning or looking down on Mercedes, which they obviously won the constructors last year. So yeah, it's hard to tell right now, but it does look like Ferrari's definitely going to have a good car. They've been improving, so it does make sense. And they're Ferrari. It's better for the sport when they're good. So yeah, it does seem like them and McLaren. You mentioned they're not having the same issues with porpoising, so them too. And then obviously you can never count out Red Bull and Mercedes. But yeah, are there any other teams or anything with any other teams that have stuck out to you? Any other drivers?
George Russell is. I know that first day that came out, people were kind of losing their mind, because I think Hamilton was like 11th and Russell was like 9th, and it was just like, come on. And then day 3, he's like at the top. So
right.
I think Russell's actually, I think he's looking very impressive. It's going to be really, really cool seeing him in a Mercedes. We haven't seen a new driver in a Mercedes in years. To see him go up against Lewis, the newcomer, the new blood, going up against the absolute legend, that's going to be awesome to watch. Because I like George Russell. I know some people have their opinions on him, but I think he seems like a really cool dude. He seems like a really nice guy, and he's obviously a great racer. I mean, he qualified second in Belgium.
Yeah,
or no?
Was it second, third? You got a podium, which, because they didn't really do the race, right?
Right. Yeah.
It was unbelievable in that car in the wet. Like that race in itself. Like, I know he obviously has an incredible resume too, coming up winning at every stage, but that race in itself is almost enough to, well, that qualifying, that lap in itself is almost enough to look at and be like, okay, he does deserve that seat,
Yeah, I would bet money that was like the moment where Toto was like, okay, if Bottas doesn't sign for another year, he's our guy.
Yeah.
Because I know it came out that Toto actually offered Bottas he offered him a 1-year extension, but Bottas was like, I need more than that. Because I listened to his interview he did on the Beyond the Grid podcast. He pretty much said that exactly. He was like, I've been on 1-year contracts pretty much my entire career, and that brings a lot of stress, brings a lot of pressure, and he just didn't want to do that again this season. So I guess, and obviously he said him and Toto were still on very good terms. Obviously he helped him get the seat at Alfa Romeo, and he said he had the choice between Williams and Alfa Romeo. So, and he liked how Alfa Romeo was looking. So I wonder if he's sort of regretting that decision, or if he still is optimistic about their chances this year.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Did he race at Williams prior to Mercedes as well?
I believe so. Yeah,
I think he did. But yeah, that's interesting, because you'd think, like from at first glance, you'd think, well, like 1-year contract, whatever, like stay with the number one team. But when I didn't hear that entire interview, but I did see a clip of that part, him explaining it, and he makes a very good point. Like you can never be comfortable when you're always on a 1-year contract and you're always the second driver, and no matter what, there's really almost like no upside other than obviously winning the constructors championship. But anytime you do well, it's, oh, he's in the best car. Anytime you do poorly, it's, oh, how he's horrible, he's ruining Lewis's chances, blah 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 blah. So for him to get, be the leader of a team, get a multi-year contract, and sort of be able to make his own name again for himself, I think it's gonna be very interesting to follow that up and down the grid. There's a lot of very interesting. I agree, Russell and Lewis is definitely one to watch for me as well. But yeah, there's so many. I'm really interested actually to see how Checo performs with Max this year, because he was definitely like in a supporting role last year for sure. But he's made a few comments like, he wants to try and win a title himself. He doesn't want to be, Max's lackey. He wants to push for himself. So I think it'll be interesting if he's able to get a good grasp of the car. He is another guy that seemed to sort of struggle with, it could have been reliability, but in the preseason testing so far, he hasn't, from what I've seen, done a ton. But yeah, I'm very interested to see. And I love Danny Rick and Lando. So, and then same with the Ferrari boys. I love them too. So just up and down the grid, there's so many fascinating storylines. So it's going to be great. Yeah. So I guess I'll go into my, I'll give you my top 5 drivers. All right. I'm going to give you my top 5 drivers right now. And I think, actually, I basically have 2 tiers. I have my top 3, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 5 guys. So I'm really giving you 8 guys. It's cool. It's a tier 1 and a tier 2. Tier 1, Lewis, Lando, Danny. I love all those guys.
Yes.
Lando, I think when Lewis leaves, Lando's probably going to be my new favorite. Danny, he could just go right into broadcasting if he wanted to. He's hilarious. Yes. You can't not like him. Just great all around. I think he kills it in Drive to Survive too. He's made a ton of fans. He was on, I don't know if you listen to Pardon My Take podcast, sports podcast, the #1 sports podcast according to them.
Okay.
He's been on there a few times and just hilarious. Like he's just a down to earth, cool guy. And then my second tier. So I've got, in no particular order for these ones, because this switches week to week for me. Yeah. I really like Pierre Gasly. I love Pierre Gasly. Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Sebastian Vettel, and Carlos Sainz. Those are my lovers. Lovers. Let me repeat that. Those are my loves.
Hey, I do. If Charles wanted to be my lover, I'm straight. But you know what? It would be hard to turn him down. He is one handsome bastard.
Yes. But my mom's in love with Lewis Hamilton. She thinks he's the hottest guy on the entire planet. She loves him. He's a handsome fellow.
Yes, for sure. He's almost 40. He does not look 40. Like
no,
I remember, when I first started watching, and I was like, is he? And they were like, he was racing back in like 2006, 2007. If you go back, I love going back, like those old, the old footage of him. He almost looks older back then.
His sideburns back then were insane. Yeah, he looks like a completely different person.
He does. And and of course he's iconic because he shows up to the grid in like all these like really nice, crazy outfits, which is awesome. Yeah. He's big into fashion, which I dig. Yeah, it's really cool. And obviously, you know, he's got the dreads. He's badass. That's just the only way to say it. He's just a badass. I love all the drivers you listed. I think the only thing I would change, pretty much I would add Max to the list because I'm just a big fan of his as of now. I think the only change I would make to your list is I would add Bottas, because I love Bottas. I just think he's a really great guy, and I feel like out of all the drivers on the grid, he gets the most flack. And you know, sometimes there's reasons, because he obviously caused that huge crash at
was it Hungary?
Yes, Hungary, when he slammed into the back of Lando, I believe.
It was Lando or Charles, one of them, and then Max got taken out. It was a whole thing. Yeah. Good thing that didn't happen at the end of the year.
No, yeah. But yeah, I feel like he's so good. He's such a good driver. He obviously qualifies. I think he does qualify better than he races. He does struggle sometimes as far as overtaking and keeping up pace in a race. But if you want to get a good sense of how just somehow it can, like, the Formula One community can be toxic, but also like really, really cool at the same time, is if anytime during like a Grand Prix, look at just the live feed on the subreddit, on the Formula One subreddit. People's comments are so ridiculous. Like you'll see like people say like Bottas is amazing. He's so good. He deserves a world championship. And then you'll see comments that are like, he's ass. He's the worst. He doesn't deserve his seat. He shouldn't be a Formula One driver. And it's like, but yeah, I just feel like out of all the drivers, he deserves a little bit more credit, because I mean, he literally was racing against the greatest of all time. And I mean, how can you compete with that? And the fact that he held his own, I mean, it's become a meme now. Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen, the Ham bot verse, or Ham for boss. Yeah.
Whatever that.
Yeah. And sadly, we may not get that ever again, those three in the top three, but I just think he deserves a little bit more credit, because he's done a lot. And I think anybody, obviously we'll see how Russell does in his position, but anybody else in that position would not have been able to hold their own as well. And the fact he was able to hold the seat for so long, you got to commend the guy. And he's also a really cool. Yeah, he's so cool. I love, my God, just his like Finnish personality is just, I love everything about him. He's just really cool. And I wish him the best of luck at Alfa Romeo. I really hope he does at least get some points and have some success with that team.
Yeah, I agree. And he's also great at social media. He won the, what was that award they gave him last year? It was some sort of like social media winner of the year, but they had a funny name for it or something, but he had his little trophy and everything. But yeah, he's great at social media. He's great at showing like the behind the scenes of stuff on and off the track. So yeah, no, I definitely, he's up there. He almost made the list for me, but just didn't quite make it. And then I kind of don't necessarily want to say least favorite drivers, but because we've also kind of gone over that too. I think Mazepin for most people kind of takes the cake for that. Yeah. And then when I first started getting into F1, I wasn't a big fan of Alonso, because when him and Lewis were back in the day, they had some battles and they were on a team together. And I read a book from one of the pit crew at the time. And yeah, there's a lot of just bad things that happened between him and Lewis at the time. So sort of had a chip on my shoulder towards Alonso, but I will admit last year, he does seem to have come back with a different attitude. And it's nice to see him so happy when he got that podium last year, which was an incredible race, keeping those tires alive. So, and so I guess I would just say, if I were to say dislike drivers, I would just generally, the idea of pay drivers doesn't sit that well with me when there's only 20 drivers in the world that get to be at the peak in Formula One. And there's maybe, I don't know, like 6 or so, maybe, I don't know, we could go through them, but even 2 or 3, I think, is maybe too many. I understand why it has to happen, but I just don't like it that people that are more talented clearly aren't getting a chance because money.
Yeah, exactly. Michael Piastri, I believe is his name. He's
Oscar, the guy that won F2 last year.
Oscar, yes, not there's so many Michaels. Yeah, Oscar.
There's a lot of Michaels.
Yeah, there are. Oscar, yeah, that's his name. he's obviously the backup for Alpine. I guess they're sort of just letting him like kind of observe, sort of like how Antonio's doing at Ferrari now, sort of like the backup driver. It's a real shame because someone in Formula 2 who's so good should get a seat in Formula 1. And it is, I mean, it's got to be like extremely discouraging for these drivers in Formula 2, Formula 3, or even IndyCar, just to see all these drivers just basically pay to get there, when there's drivers who have so much skill and who could easily compete at the front, probably just not get their chance. It's a little bit disappointing. I'll say that I also used to be sort of against Fernando Alonso, obviously world champion, but pretty much before he retired and came back, he just had really horrible time with McLaren, and just he just seemed to have like a really sour attitude. And looking back, it's obvious why you have a terrible car that breaks down anytime you even have a chance to get points. That's got to be like the most frustrating thing, especially for somebody who's used to winning. But he's definitely gotten back in my good graces this past season. I think he's obviously a good driver. Seems like a cool guy. I'm not a fan of Ocon. I've just his interviews in Drive to Survive, he seems like a cool guy. Obviously I'm going to say that about everybody. Every guy in Formula 1 seems like a cool guy, but just him and Max are actually pretty similar. And I know they had that incident a couple of years ago where Esteban tried to unlap himself with Max, and it ended up causing the collision, which caused the shove. But just sort of his attitude sometimes, when I just don't like when people won't take responsibility, especially when it's like obviously their fault. That's why pretty much the only thing that kind of taints Michael Schumacher's reputation is that he would not take responsibility ever. And anytime he would be too aggressive or make a move that just wasn't okay, he would pretty much blame it on the other guy. And I hate that. I don't like that at all. And I feel like he suffers from that a little bit, but he obviously is a good driver. He got this P2 in the race this past season, or no, he won. Sorry, it was Vettel that got P2.
Thanks to Alonso, but yeah,
yes,
he did win.
Absolutely. And sadly, Vettel had that taken away from him, but yeah, him getting that win was really, really cool, and he handled that really, really well. And he did handle a lot of his mistakes this season a little bit better to me. I did try to, anytime I like have a certain opinion on a driver that's maybe more negative, I try to sort of keep focus on them, because I would like to sort of, anytime I dislike somebody, I would like that opinion to change. Right. And definitely this past season, my remarks on him have definitely gotten a little bit better. But besides him and Mazepin, there's not really any other drivers that I don't really care for. I hate to say it, but I definitely think it was time for Kimi to retire last year. He said it himself. He was sick of it. He just had no fight left in him. And it was just kind of sad to watch. But I love him as a person. I hope he still has sort of like a spot in the community or whatever. I hope he just doesn't completely disappear. But yeah, for the most part, I like a lot of the other drivers, like y'all's Canadian drivers. I love Latifi. Really, really terrible things he had to go through after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. But Stroll, yeah, he's interesting. I kind of like him. He's obviously a paid driver. His dad owns the team, but he's had a lot of great moments, I feel like.
Yeah, he's had his fair share of. He's shown enough that it's not like a Mazepin situation where it's clear that he's just there because of his dad, but it also is clear if it wasn't for his dad, he wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. He just, as a Canadian, he's not like your typical Canadian, I guess you could say. So he's not someone that I would say I root for very much, but I'm sure I'm going to the race in Montreal this year, which I'm super excited for, but I'm sure once I'm there and the crowd's obviously going to be rooting for him because he's Canadian, I'm sure I'll hope he does well there. But Yeah, he'd be near the bottom for me.
Right.
But in terms of like actual race weekends, how would you say, like, when you're watching a race or trying to find out information for a race, like what do you use? Like, obviously we both use Reddit a lot. But like, so how do you watch your races? And like, do you use like multiple screens? Like, what's your race setup?
So I use like when I watch the race, I'll watch it on just ESPN. Well, actually, most of the time it's on ESPN2, which their coverage is just Sky Sports. So I
Okay.
hear the like Buxton, all those commentators. But during the race, I try to keep my focus on the race like as much as possible, but I'm also simultaneously looking at like the live feed on the Reddit, getting people's reactions, because it's fun to interact and to voice your opinion on things that are happening and also see other people's reactions, especially because I up until now have not had anybody to talk to about the sport.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, for the most part, I'll just watch it on TV. I try to watch every race live. I luckily was able to watch most of the races live. There was a couple of times where I had to work during the Grand Prix, and like I would be sitting there like waiting on my client to arrive, and I would just like they would be coming in and I'd be like typing information. I would have my phone under the computer screen. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. And they're like, yeah, we're gonna do this scene, this scene, and this scene. And I'm just like watching like Max and Lewis like battle it out in the first lap of Silverstone or whatever. And it's just sometimes you have to do what you have to do. I did have to watch a couple of races on my phone, but I will catch all of them. But yeah, I definitely like doing the live feed with the live broadcast of the race. What about you?
Right. Yeah, sorry, there's one thing I was gonna add there, but I forget. But whatever, doesn't matter. For me, I watch I got F1 TV about halfway through last year. And it's pretty cool because you can watch like the onboards of each driver. There's a thing called like the pit lane channel where I think it's Jolly on Palmer, wherever you say that, and a couple other guys that are more like knowledgeable of the tech side. So they really break down like more of the stuff about the tires and the pit stops and the strategy of the racing. But they also have like the main broadcasts of the Sky Sports, and there's no commercials, which is nice. Because
Oh,
sometimes they go the commercial at the absolute worst time, and they'll come back and someone will have like an overtake, like
yep,
second or third, and they won't even mention it.
yep.
But yeah, so, and it's not too expensive. I think it's maybe like 10-15 a month or something like that. It's not crazy expensive. So I like to do that. And then yeah, I always have like the Reddit up and Twitter or whatever's going to
Yep.
just to see what people are saying. But depending on the race, depending on how it's going. But yeah, I think that's pretty much how I do it. We have it on cable here as well, on like TSN, but they show the Sky Sports, and then they just cut it. The commercials sometimes are annoying the way they cut in at the worst times, but first world problems.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that's pretty much how I do it. Are you watching anything interesting now in terms of racing? I know DTS comes out March 11th, the new season.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. I'm 100% going to get the F1 TV this season just because I had a little bit of problem. You know, I have YouTube TV. I don't have like Xfinity or DirecTV or anything like that. I don't have like a good cable hookup. And sometimes with the streaming or with YouTube TV specifically, there was like I forget which Grand Prix it was, but it just wasn't being broadcast. So
Oh,
I found a live feed on Reddit, thankfully, so I was able to watch. But I just not being able to guarantee being able to watch the race live is not good for me because I want to take in as much as possible. And I didn't even know you could watch like the onboards of the cars for each driver. That's really sick.
yeah.
I'm definitely going to get that for this season. I try to I love watching the qualifying too. Like the
Mhm.
practices are cool, just getting to see sort of how the drivers are sort of taking to the track, but the qualifying is just it's almost as fun to watch as the race for me, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. I think I was going to say something about how one of the tough things in North America that holds back a bit of the fandom is sometimes on Sunday morning the races are at like 7, 8 a.m. And
Bro,
I mean,
yes.
it's not that early, but it's a little early, so it's gonna be a little tough, but
Hmm.
it's not the biggest deal. What's your opinion on sprint races? And then I think there's what, 3 this year?
Yeah. Gosh, I should have uh, written down which races they were. I think I I wasn't a fan of the sprint races this past season, but just because it seemed like pointless to me. It just seemed like they were just trying to create more racing. Basically, they just wanted more laps. And what bothered me the most is that they didn't call it a race. It is a race. It's a short race, but it's a race. I didn't like how the points were handed out. 3 points to number one, then 2 points, then 1 point, and then no other points for the rest of the grid. I didn't like that at all. But what they've come up with for this upcoming season, I definitely like a lot. Giving points to the top 10, I think, is really cool. It's really smart. It gives people incentive to want to overtake. I mean, if you're last season, if you're in sixth, you're not going to fight for fourth? You know what I mean?
Right.
While Max and Lewis and Bottas are way in the distance, there's really no point. But now there is a point. I like that pole, or in the record books, pole is going to be given to the qualifying pole position. I think that's a good move. I did not like that pole was considered the winner of the sprint race. I thought that was dumb. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I don't like the idea of that being the norm. I like it being sort of like an anomaly, sort of like something that happens a couple of times a year. I think that's going to be really cool. I know some people don't like it at all, but I like what they're doing this upcoming season.
Yeah, it's nice when it's just like a once in a while it comes on, you're like, oh yeah, that's this weekend. It'll be fun.
Yep.
But they're setting it as the qualify, whoever wins quali, they technically get pole. But say like Max wins, is leading after quali, but then like Checo is leading after the sprint race. Checo would start the actual race in first, correct?
Yes.
Like on technically pole, but so that's why it's a little bit confusing. But I agree that for the record books, it does look better, because otherwise qualifying is sort of diminished. And I personally, I love qualifying. Like Q3 is like, it's so exciting. Those last few minutes, like the first few minutes are obviously can be a little boring, but once they get down to those final laps, it's unreal. Like Max's Jeddah qualifying, like he just crashed right at the end there, but that was one of the best laps of all time. That was unbelievable. So qualifying is great.
Yeah, it sucks because he could have that probably would have been the best lap of the entire season to me, because just like not only like just how fast he was, and like purple sector, just the stakes, like how bad he needed that. And that could have changed the whole direction. But it just, of course, with the way last season was, of course he crashed, just added more drama, more issues. But
that whole race, that whole weekend was just one drama after drama after drama.
It was. I really like Jeddah. I think that track is really cool, especially in F1 2021.
Yeah,
it's
so fast.
It is. It's so much fun. And like, you have to be really precise with your turns, but like, God, it's just so quick. But yeah, qualifying it's a blast. I'm trying to think of like any other qualifying moments that stood out. Obviously Monza, but they did a sprint race at Monza.
They did,
right? Yeah.
I think Lewis fell a few spots back, and then
obviously their crash.
What happened during the race? But yeah, that was quite the race. But yeah, that's the Brazil sprint race was definitely the best one. But like, I mean, anytime you're going to put one of the fastest cars at the back and they're going to be going through, like, that's going to be more exciting. So like I've argued for, not argued, I have no one to argue with, but like I've thought at one point, like what they do in F2, they kind of do like a half reverse grid. They do like the top, I don't know what it is, like the bottom 10 start top 10 or something like that. I forget exactly how they do it, but they do for one, there's the reverse grid, which is kind of interesting, because then you'll have like Mazepin starting first for the sprint race, but then so it would be very interesting to have like Lewis and Max coming from 20th to 19th, and then they have to overtake. But I guess then there's you run the risk of, like we talked about earlier, do you want to risk crashing out your car and then not being able to go in the real race? But that would be pretty interesting to see, even if they just did it once a year, to see like just reverse the grid and have, Max and Lewis starting at the back for 30 laps or 25 laps or whatever it is. That'd be cool.
I've recently started to like get more into it, but I did not watch I watched some highlights of Formula 2, but I did not even know that was a thing.
Oh, okay.
The reverse
grid. I could be explaining it wrong, but I know there's something in F2 where they do that.
No, that's awesome. Like that, just you even saying that like just got me hyped just thinking about it. Like just the thought of like Mazepin being at the front Like, even if it's just like, it's so cool to me just because I love underdogs. I love when someone who is just fighting their way, you know, obviously the champs, you know, or have their spot, but like, just even if it was once a year, you know, I don't think Formula One would ever do that, but I think that would be really fucking cool.
Yeah, it'd be sweeter. Like, you know, like every other sport has like all-star games. Like, you
Yep.
couldn't really do it with F1 because the amount it would cost, and then like it's not worth the risk for the drivers. But that'd be something like you know, show off their overtaking abilities and stuff. That'd be really cool. But yeah, speaking of like underdogs and stuff, I'm watching just last night. I started watching on Netflix. There's this came across a documentary. I think it must be new. It's about Bubba Wallace. He's a NASCAR driver. It's called Race. And like I couldn't care less about NASCAR, but he's I think only like the 4th ever NASCAR driver that's black. And obviously with what's been going on in the world the last few years, he's taken a stand, and that's caused a lot of friction in the NASCAR community, you could say. Like he spearheaded the movement against getting to get the Confederate flag removed from NASCAR, and then there's a whole controversy around someone putting a noose, whether or not they put a noose in his paddock, which even like that's messed up. Just even have to deal with that stuff. And they do it. It's pretty good because they mix in like his come. It's kind of like with Lewis, so he's like the only one. But they mix like his come up with what's going on in the world, and it's interesting. So I'd recommend that for people looking for something to get them through the racing drought we're in right now. But we're only 2 weeks away. We're almost there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna watch that, absolutely, because I haven't been like following him, but I've definitely read up a lot about him. I like him a lot. Obviously, what he stands for is great, and he's a great driver.
Yeah.
That the same race that Villeneuve qualified for. I know people were also talking trash about Bubba Wallace, that they were saying that he also wasn't going to qualify, but then of course he did.
Yeah, I think he came second.
He ended up getting second place, which is like insane. I absolutely love that. I'll get that. What did you say it was called? Is it on Netflix?
I think it's called Race Bubba Wallace, something like that. It's probably it was at the top of the page when I signed on, so it must be new.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'll definitely watch that. That sounds awesome.
I guess we've been going for a while here. Should we maybe plug our socials and get out of here?
I think so. Yeah, we
haven't posted much yet, but
no, yeah, we're still we're still obviously first episode.
Yeah,
I think it went really well. You know, we have Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and obviously the podcast is going to be going on different avenues wherever you get your podcasts. Just make sure to follow us, where our social accounts are still very, very new. So there may be some features like, I know YouTube, we don't have a custom URL yet. We won't be able to do that until we get 100 subscribers, but I feel like that's going to come really quickly, especially with consistent content and stuff like that. But yeah, for everybody listening, this is like just the start. And obviously this is our first time doing this. I don't know. I'm sure you know, you're obviously in sports broadcasting, so you have a little bit more experience, but I've never done a podcast before. So I apologize if I've stumbled over my words or said a bunch, but you know, that's something that's gonna improve over time. You know, we're still working out the kinks. We're gonna get there. I think for our first episode though, it went really, really well. It was a blast. But yeah, make sure, give us a follow on everything. If you enjoyed this, follow us, rate 5 stars, all that stuff. But yeah, do you have anything you want to say before we sign off?
Just our Twitter is, I think it's just Harder Soft F1, and YouTube will probably just post it under, I think it's just Harder Soft podcast. You type in something along those lines. I guess you got to be careful typing in Harder Soft sometimes, but just put in F1 at the end of that, and you'll be good. But yeah, if you follow us on anything, we'll link to all our other stuff. But yeah, we'd appreciate any feedback, or anyone that liked it, hated it, let us know. But yeah, I definitely had a good fun time doing this, and I think we're going to try and put out at least one every week, and then some clips and other things. And then once the season starts, we'll try and mix in some other content. But yeah, no, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it was great. And of course, if anything like absolutely insane drops, you know, we can always jump in here and record like a quick 30-minute podcast or whatever we need to. But yeah, the goal is definitely once a week, getting that consistency in. But yeah, this has been great. I've highly enjoyed it. I'm very looking forward to the future of this podcast and discussing this season. I think it's going to be an absolute blast. It's going to be a banger. But yeah, it's been great.
All right, man. Well, we'll chat soon, but this has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time.